I'm Guru Jagat, and I'm here interviewing Marianne Williamson in her candidacy for the presidency of the United States 2020. We're going to talk about the politic of love and how this conversation has entered the political theater in such a profound way. Marianne Williamson.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. What you're doing for the political dialogue and the political theater, as it were, is really changing the course of human history. And I just want to, we know the power of love because that's what we work with. And I want to just talk about how you see that imprinting in the people that you're seeing on the campaign trail and what they're saying to you and how this dialogue is really moving the needle.
Well, there are two political universes as I experience it. One is the establishment powers and the media and the money and the polls and the infrastructure and the rules. And then there are the people of the United States who are going to vote in this election. And it's two different worlds. So I have seen both how corrupt the system is and how wonderful people are. So to the extent to which it's about talking to real people about what's really going on in this country, what we care about, where we need to go, it's a wonderful experience. And that includes media that's fair. Yeah. When media is fair, I think, given the fact that I am running for president, there's a certain level of toughness that's appropriate. So it's all part of the job audition, you know.
Yeah.
So all of that is fine. And then there are all those other things that go along with it.
Yeah.
And that's tough on any given day. But I'm sure that's how every candidate feels. And it's a roller coaster ride. And, you know, once you pass the Rubicon, once you've decided to do this, you just forge ahead. It takes a lot of emotional and psychological and even spiritual discipline.
Yes.
As well as physical and intellectual.
Yeah. And we're seeing that exhibited, which really, in terms of creating a new archetype of leadership, what is being exhibited by using your spiritual and all of the tools that you have to kind of pave a new way for leadership. This, in my opinion, we're going to see how this changes what people feel like they can do in leadership roles. And so it's very powerful, but I know that when you're kind of breaking that wind, you're breaking that kind of sound barrier. It's a potent.
Well, as you know, being very much a leader yourself, I don't feel I'm creating a new paradigm of leadership. I feel I am living the new paradigm leadership that is simply America and the world today within the political context.
Yeah.
I'm not saying or doing anything everybody I know isn't saying and doing. I'm just doing it within a corner of the culture that is so regressive in a way, backwards. It's very 20th century.
Yeah.
21st century leadership paradigm is different. It's not just me, and it's not something I'm creating. It's what is true now in business, in spirituality, in education, in health and healing. Much more integrative, much more multidimensional. It only looks weird because people aren't used to seeing it in the context of politics.
Right.
But to more and more of us, they look weird.
Right.
Not them as individuals, but the entire way of being and talking and approaching problems.
Yeah. Well, part of what I want to kind of do what I can in this conversation around is the millennials, the Gen Zs, the people who are going to a yoga class or believe in some sort of wellness or spirituality, where the disconnect between the avocado toast or the downward dog is and politics, and how we can really get this group of people thinking and moving and voting in a different way. So
I really appreciate that because my experience, and you'll tell me if you think it's differently, my experience is about that the challenge is exposure. Because when I do talk to those audiences, these are people who were brought up with parents who know you and me.
yes,
Who have read the books and gone to yoga classes, etc.
Right.
So when I'm with a lot of the younger generation that you were talking about, I feel very heard. I feel like they very much get me. Things I might say to certain older people, and the older people go, huh? I say to younger people, and they go, oh yeah. I mean, it's just, it's exposure more than it is translation. It's very much exposure rather than translation. I'm speaking the conversation people are having today.
Yeah. But then how do we get that exposure turning into votes? Because I think the part that I see a lot is there's an apathy or a fog in both the privilege, but also because maybe their parents were people who had dropped out of the political conversation. They haven't been educated to be political. And so I think that's where this bridge has to be gapped.
And that's where you personally and people such as yourself have a big role to play. Yeah. There is no serious spiritual or religious tradition anywhere that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. So only the most counterfeit spirituality can be used to justify political disengagement. There is a difference between transcendence and denial.
Yes.
The fact that you're not looking at human suffering doesn't mean you're in some higher spiritual state. That means you might be using a false version of the spiritual to justify your unwillingness or lack of appetite for looking. None of us find it fun.
Right.
None of us find it fun. Yeah. But if somebody comes into the doctor's office with a broken elbow, the doctor doesn't say, "Ugh, it's so negative, it's so toxic. Let me look at your shoe instead."
Right, right.
I mean, you have to look at the wound, not focus on the wound, not only go on and on about the wound, because if you do that, then you do expand the energy. But if you don't look at it at all, once again, you're not in transcendence, you're in denial.
Yeah, yeah.
And so voting, I believe that citizenship is a part of conscious living, and that's the transition we need to make to a place where we see our active participation in our collective behavior. All we're talking about here is collective karma. If there's individual karma, there's also collective karma. All the country is a collection of people. It's the same principles.
Yeah.
So if you're responsible for your impeccability as an individual, then we're responsible for our impeccability as a collective. And that's what voting is about.
Yeah. And now we have seen an upswing in 2018. There's an upswing, and I do believe that the future is bright around this kind of engagement. We see what's happening with all of the walkouts, with the climate crisis, and I mean, there's a huge kind of upswing around how we can engage. But just the normal person walking on the street and who has some maybe open-minded views or doesn't want destruction for all the climate or destruction for their certain, just destructive tendencies, how do they connect politic to what's happening in their neighborhoods?
It's so interesting that you say that. Several years ago, this was during some early years of my really waking up to what this issue is. There was a young woman, she was in the audience, I have no idea where I was, and she asked me a question about an environmental issue. And her understanding of the issue, her analysis of the issue, her recognition of the forces at play was very sophisticated.
Yeah.
And then I said to her, "So who's your congresswoman or who's your congressman?" And I could tell from the look on her face, she didn't even understand. She said, I think Feinstein, who was the senator.
Right.
She didn't connect in her own mind. Even though she had a very sophisticated understanding of the environmental issue, she didn't seem to see any bridge between that and governmental action. Now, when I asked her that question, it was because I did know the issue and I did know there was a bill or there should be a bill or something. That's why I asked her. I thought, that's where the problem is. This woman, who obviously is coming from a spiritual place, I mean, she wouldn't have been there, but also totally was on it, didn't even in her mind, it has something to do with governmental policy.
Right.
And I think that that's where a lot of people have been. And I'm not saying that it's been too much on the nonprofit and private sector activism. I'm just saying it's been too little on the level of politics. What we have now, obviously, a case in point. Yeah. Our Environmental Protection Agency is headed by an ex-chemical company executive. Yeah. Before that, by an ex-lobbyist for the oil companies. These people are there to advocate for the interests of fossil fuel companies.
Right.
And the EPA was set up, of course, to protect the American people against the overreach by those companies.
Right.
So this is political. That is true for one reason only, and that's that Donald Trump is president.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you've been kind of taking this message of the power of, love into the psychosis of fear, what is your experience in terms of opening that conversation, and what's the experience on the ground?
Well, I agree with what you said. Over the last few years, it's been changing.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time when I first wrote my book, Healing the Soul of America, in 1997. Nobody wanted to hear of this. Things have changed. The Obama presidency changed things. Trump being elected has changed things. I think, as I agree with you entirely. However, what we need now is really to tip over, and that's where people like yourself are so important, because I think that you in this area, like in so many areas, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You are translating spiritual principle into practical advice, guidance, and understanding. And that's what I have been doing as well for the last 35 years. In this case, because I'm the candidate, I need other people to help me out here.
Yeah, so what do we do to get you on this stage October 15th? What do we do to get you to the convention? What can people do?
Well, you and others of our colleagues have massive audiences. You know, it's really interesting because when you look at the whole yoga community, health and wellness, spirituality, we represent massive numbers.
Massive.
And we represent money too. People in this community spend, but this community doesn't have the collective mental habit of giving to political campaigns.
That's right.
So, you know, it's not that there's no money. I remember a friend of mine, maybe someone even that you know, said she was doing some kind of fundraiser for me and she was charging $25 a ticket. And I just made a comment, I thought that was sort of a low ticket price. Right. And she said, but a bunch of yogis will be there. I said, yeah, yogis who spend $250 on the Lululemon yoga pants.
Regularly.
Yeah, so
regularly.
And I also think it's important for us to remember that any area of American civilization that we have touched, we have influenced.
Yeah.
Where do you think those yoga mats come from?
Right.
Where do you think all that mindfulness stuff comes from? The only reason we haven't influenced politics yet is because we haven't been there.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people say, well, I don't want to go there because it's toxic. It's toxic because we haven't gone there. Help me out here.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, I was saying in some other interview, I'm not saying I'm the only person who could do this. Mm-hmm. I'm not even saying I'm the only person, that I'm a person who could do it better than anyone else, but I'm the only person running for president this year.
That's right.
Who's doing this.
Yes.
So this opportunity will be as big as we make it.
Yeah. And it is this is a collective movement.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what political power is. It's groups.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is an exponential group, so we know what the amount of force and power that this group has.
That's why I'm so grateful to you for doing this. Thank you so much.
It's about attention. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for stepping onto the stage and doing something that no one, and people with big, huge kind of scenes said, no, thank you. I'm not interested in doing this, and you've been the one that is taking this mantle. So,
when my career began, the AIDS crisis emerged onto the scene very quickly. And also, I grew up in a generation where we read Alan Watts and Ram Dass in the morning and went to anti-Vietnam War protests in the afternoon. And I grew up in a home that was very, there was no difference between the sense of our love of God and our political activism. Right. So the way that this particular community unfolded over the years has always been, I never understood it. I was never part of
baffling.
It. Yeah, it was always baffling to me.
Yeah. No, I think that this is this has definitely been my message, and obviously since you announced your presidency, and when, the Congress run and everything that you're doing in this arena, that all we have to do is move the attention of this macro mind of we're the majority. I mean, this is something I say all the time. We're not the minority. We actually are the majority of people who want better neighborhoods, want more compassionate laws and more compassionate places for people to be held in sickness and health and all of. I mean, this is the majority, not the minority. And so we need to stand up. We need to get out there, and we need to make donations to your campaign. And are people organizing how can people organize in their communities?
Well, if people go to Marianne2020.com, and that's Marianne, Marianne, 2020.com, and you fill out, you're interested in volunteering or whatever, all the information is on there about how you can participate, get to know people, and start with your own community. You're a perfect example. We all have friends. We all have communities. We have so much more power. So much more power. Somebody said, what can I do for you? Money and buzz, your own endorsement, your own, and that's why I'm so grateful to you, an endorsement to say, yeah, I think this is a good idea. I think sometimes we're just not used to using our voices when it comes to political matters.
Yes.
But we all have something to say. Yeah. Just say it.
And just looking at the statistics around women who are politically giving money to political campaigns, it's very low. And I think that engagement, just in general across just for women, if we can just get women to start to politically use their money where their mouth is, right. I feel like this is a huge step in the right direction.
And I think I agree with you entirely. And I also noticed that some people think, well, the money I could give to it isn't enough to make a difference. But political campaigns don't work that way.
That's right.
There isn't any amount that's too small, actually.
It all counts.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You are doing such a good job.
It means more to me than you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean that. Thank you so much for this.